Okay, fantastic. So let's go to the next part and know further about FDA as an approved treatment for depression and how we can use it in substance use disorder. I do not have any conflict of interest specifically related to this talk. And we have different neuromodulation technologies. So we have been discussing about varieties of different neuromodulation technologies. Today we are mainly focused on transcranial magnetic stimulation, and we have varieties of different devices. My lab is mainly focused in using these technologies to develop new treatments. We try to individualize finding the right circuit and even using robots to be able to optimize the way that we do the stimulation. But in terms of the clinical approved or cleared indications for TMS, and being FDA cleared or approved, I mean, there are two different terminologies, and we will discuss a little bit in terms of how they are different. But right now, the approval or clearance for TMS is for depression 2008, OCD 2018, smoking cessation 2020, anxious depression 2021, and then an accelerated protocol, we call it SAND protocol, September 2022, and then age expansion to 15 years old, 2024, and then to 86 years old. And now, just a few weeks ago, we had an approval or clearance for an accelerated deep TMS protocol that we'll discuss about as well. So these are the new updates in the field that we have. And other applications are, of course, off-label, including for substance use disorder. It might be interesting that in substance use disorder, we have a CE approval in Europe. And the process to receive CE approval is very different than what we have here in the US. And it is based on something like two large case series that are published from Italy and in cocaine users. And they have been able to receive a kind of CE approval on what they call psychoactive substance use disorder. So I'm not sure if we have any non-psychoactive substance use disorder or not, but that is the terminology that they had in their approval. But going back and just having an overview about most recent updates that we have for TMS in depression. And to learn it, just let's divide it into 4 major generations, okay? So now we are in the 4th generation of TMS. So we have 4 major generation of TMS interventions, specifically for depression. Let's start with the 1st generation. The 1st generation started in 1996, 1997. Mark George, as the father of the field, started doing left DLPFC with a specific protocol, starting in NIH, going to MUSC, and leading that. And that protocol, the initial protocol was something like 40 minutes. And then they realized that they can reduce the time to something like 20 minutes. So the 1st generation has 3,000 pulses, 10 hertz TMS over left DLPFC. And that is the main thing that received FDA approval in the 1st generation. And then the 2nd generation has a specific pattern of pulse. As Kathleen mentioned, we call it ITBS. And how ITBS is different with the 1st generation, it has a specific brain language. So with TMS, we talk to the brain, and the pulse pattern could be optimized in a way that brain can better understand. We have a specific pattern of pulses inside brain we call theta on gamma. So there is theta oscillation, which is something like a 5 hertz oscillation, and then we have gamma, which is around 50 hertz oscillation. So the combination is called gamma on theta, and that is a specific brain language. So they tried to mimic that language into TMS pulses, and they showed that that specific pattern can have much better efficacy in terms of short-term intervention, can result the same sort of interaction. So in a trial, Daniel Bloomberg, they showed that just 3 minutes of that protocol with 600 pulses would do the same job as 3,000 pulses with something like 37 minutes. So they have been able to shorten the amount of time that they needed to do TMS for depression to something like 3 minutes with just 600 pulses with ITBS. And this is the second generation, okay, with ITBS.
And can I just ask, where's the 50 hertz? Kathleen mentioned this.
So the 50 hertz is, these pulses are coming in 50 hertz. So these triplets are in 50 hertz. And then they are repeated in
5 per second.
in 5 per second, exactly. So in 2 seconds, you have 10 of them. So the frequency is 5 hertz here, but each of these triplets are in 50 hertz. So that's a sort of theta gamma combination, which is a kind of a sort of a brain language. And it seems that it is communicating better with brain. And in terms of the real efficacy, the real world efficacy of this intervention that is already happening in the field, in something like 5,000 patients with TRD, the response rate is something like 60%. And response in depression, it means that the level of depression that they have goes under 50%. So 50% reduction is response. And 30% remission, they are not anymore being diagnosed and they do not have the criteria to be depressed. So 60% response, 30% remission. And this is the reality that we see in the clinical practice as well. So in every 3 patients that we have, 2 of them would make a significant benefit, and 1 of them, they go to remission. Great work by Harold Sackheim. And also the other thing in the real world data that people realized, that the response usually starts after 10 sessions of a stimulation. And to have a good amount of response, you need to have at least 30 sessions of TMS, even something like 36. And there are people who are late bloomers. So you see in the clinical work that there are people who are not making benefit even to something like 20, 25 sessions, and then you realize that they start to make benefit in the later stages. But these are the sort of 2 major pieces that we know about the real world impact of these interventions. And then we have the 3rd generation. In 3rd generation, we have accelerated protocol. What does it mean to have accelerated protocol? So in different animal models and neuroscience studies, people realize that if you do TMS 1 session and you do it again and again, and if you make it something like give brain a little bit of a space, and then you do TMS again, there is an accumulation of response over time. So people start to think about, okay, is there any chance that we can put multiple sessions per day, and instead of bringing people every day to the clinic for 6 weeks doing 30 sessions of intervention, can we do it in just 5 days? And every day doing something like 10 sessions of a stimulation, and increase the number of pulses that we can do, and trying to narrow down to a shorter period of time. So these are called accelerated protocols. And there are even studies that people do what we call 1D TMS. So they put everything in just 1 day, 20 sessions of TMS in 1 day, and then they augment that with D-cycloserine, which is an agent that increases neuroplasticity, and also lisdexamfetamine to be able to boost the neuroplasticity to the highest level and do everything. And they show that it is working. And in just 1 day, and then in long-term follow-up, the effect is there, which is quite interesting. Those studies are all open label, kind of one-wing feasibility showing that this is working. But it seems that it is an idea that we can work on. A recent trial that is being done by Brainsway, and they compared an accelerated protocol compared to their conventional protocol. This is their conventional protocol that people should come to the clinic 4 weeks, 1 session per day, 5 days per week, and 20 sessions, and then something like 2 weeks of maintenance. Instead, they did 2 weeks of 5 sessions per day, and they also remained flexible in terms of, for 2 weeks, you can just come 5 days in the first week and 1 day in the second week. Or you can come something like 2 days this week, depending on, so they have started to realize they can be even a little bit adaptive and flexible in terms of people schedule.
This is their singlet coil?
This is their H1 coil, Brainswale coil.
It's a singlet coil, because they have several coils.
This one is mainly the pattern goes through DLPFC singulate.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the,
Singlet
yeah,
coil.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it also covers the DLPFC part as well. So this is the H1 coil that they are using. And they compared the accelerated version, 5 sessions per day, and said non-inferiority trial. And they showed that it showed that the accelerated workup starts even earlier to show the efficacy in terms of the depression. And they received FDA clearance just recently. So these are the first generation, RTMS, second generation, ITBS, third generation, accelerated protocol. And fourth generation is individualized, circuit-based, imaging-based. You do imaging and then you target a specific area. And this is based on how we know about different brain disorders and psychotic disorders in terms of the circuits of those disorders. Specifically in the field of depression, multiple teams in Harvard, Mark Fox, Sean Siddiqui, Robin Cash, others, they realized that potentially if we find the most negative connectivity between DLPFC and subgenual cingulate cortex and target that is going to be the most effective area for targeting. And based on that, a group of people decided to combine the first and the third and fourth generation together. So doing accelerated and individualization together, and they call it Stanford neuromodulation. And the main lead of that project was Nolan Williams, that we lost him a few weeks ago, and it was just a very tragic, and it's just, yeah, we are all really very, very sad about that big loss to the field. And he showed that 1 week of intervention with SAND protocol can reduce the level of depression with MADRS from 30 to like 10, and it could be there for several weeks. And it was a sort of a revolutionary process. And it was so impactful, and the effect size was so large that the data monitoring committee basically stopped the trial and said, okay, that's enough, because you already have enough data. They have been planning for a larger trial, but they basically stopped in the middle. And so, I mean, you already have enough data. It's not necessary to move even further beyond that. And there are other teams that are providing evidence of how individualization are working. Desmond, Ziad, Yevit. I mean, there are multiple different teams that are working on that. And interestingly, there are even trials that they try to find other biomarkers to do individualization, and they failed. So this is one of the failed trials that they try to target individualized targeting based on the connectivity to right anterior insular cortex, and they have not been able to show any significant kind of when they have been comparing with non-individualized, it was not that much better. So they basically failed to show that the individualization is working. So there are details in terms of the protocols, and this is something that we train our residents. We even have some like a online course. This is kind of an online course that we have the free, so that if you go to that QR code, you can just have that sort of training. And if you are interested to share that with your residents, just let me know. I can send you the QR codes. It's a free online 6 hours of training for TMS for clinical work. We initially designed it for Lithuanian kind of residents in psychiatry, and now it is available publicly for others.